Close your eyes and let's begin. A highway stretches across the darkness long before sunrise. The headlights reach only a short distance ahead, revealing fragments of road that appear and disappear beneath the tires. Somewhere beyond the windshield, beyond the horizon, hidden by night, lies a destination that remains uncertain. The radio hums softly. The sky is still black. The world feels suspended between yesterday and tomorrow. Inside the vehicle sits a young man who does not yet know which parts of his life will matter most. He does not know which doors will open or which ones will remain permanently closed. He cannot see the future waiting beyond the curve of the road. He only knows that movement itself feels important. There is comfort in motion. There is comfort in following a road even when the final destination remains invisible. Many years later, millions of people would recognize his voice almost immediately. They would recognize the slow Texas drawl, the relaxed confidence, the unusual way he seemed to speak as though he were discovering each thought while saying it aloud. They would know his face from movie screens, interviews, award ceremonies, and magazine covers. Yet before any of that existed, there were roads like this one, empty roads, quiet roads, roads travelled without cameras. The landscape around him remains hidden in darkness. Fields stretch outward on both sides. Fence posts flash briefly in the headlights before disappearing again. The occasional gas station glows in the distance like a lighthouse on a quiet sea. There is something peaceful about these hours before dawn. The world has not yet fully awakened. Expectations are still asleep. Possibilities remain untouched. Perhaps that is why roads appear again and again throughout certain lives. Not because they guarantee answers, but because they offer space for questions. A road allows a person to move while thinking, to observe while travelling, to leave one chapter without fully understanding what the next chapter will contain. Long before movie sets and red carpets, before interviews and book tours, there was Texas. The Texas of Matthew McConaughey's childhood was filled with sunlight, open skies, football fields, family stories, and the particular rhythm of everyday life that develops in places where space itself seems larger. The roads were long, the horizons were wide, the distances between towns encouraged patience. In the morning, sunlight would spill across neighbourhoods and highways with a brightness that seemed to stretch forever. Pickup trucks moved steadily along roads bordered by grass and scattered trees. High school football games filled Friday nights. Families gathered for meals, conversations, and celebrations that blended routine with tradition. The world he entered was not one built around Hollywood. It was not a world of film studios or entertainment executives. It was a world shaped by ordinary people navigating ordinary challenges. Yet within those ordinary experiences were lessons that would remain long after childhood ended. Family played an enormous role in shaping the atmosphere around him. His parents possessed strong personalities. Their relationship carried intensity, humour, unpredictability, and resilience. Stories from his later life often returned to family because family represented more than a collection of relatives. It represented a foundation. Inside family homes, children learn how adults respond to setbacks. They learn how people communicate. They learn what courage looks like and what fear looks like. They observe conflict and forgiveness. They absorb lessons without realizing they are learning. As a boy, Matthew watched. He watched conversations unfold around dinner tables. He watched adults make decisions. He watched people laugh, argue, recover, and continue forward. These observations would eventually become valuable in unexpected ways. Acting requires observation. Storytelling requires observation. Understanding human beings often begins by quietly watching them. The afternoons of childhood carried their own atmosphere. Sunlight reflected from sidewalks and parked cars. Football sailed through warm air. Friends gathered in neighbourhoods and schoolyards. There were bikes, games, conversations, and the small adventures that seem enormous when viewed through youthful eyes. Yet even within active childhoods, there are quiet moments. A child sitting alone on a porch. A teenager staring across an empty field. A young person imagining lives beyond the horizon. Such moments rarely appear important while they are happening. Only later do they reveal themselves as early signs of curiosity. The Texas sky often encourages that kind of thinking. Large skies create large perspectives. A horizon stretching endlessly outward naturally invites questions about what exists beyond it. As years passed, school became another environment shaping his development. Classrooms introduced new ideas. Teachers opened doors into subjects that stretched beyond immediate experience. Hallways filled with students moving toward futures that remained undefined. The teenage years rarely move in straight lines. Interests appear and disappear. Plans change. Certainties become uncertainties. Young people often spend enormous amounts of energy trying to determine who they are becoming. Matthew was no exception. There were sports, there were friendships, there were ambitions that shifted with time. Like many young people, he explored possibilities without fully understanding where they might lead. The football field carried its own lessons. Under bright stadium lights, teamwork mattered, discipline mattered, preparation mattered. Success depended not only on individual effort but on cooperation. The field taught patience. It taught resilience after mistakes. It taught the value of showing up repeatedly. Yet life often develops in unexpected directions. The future rarely announces itself clearly. Instead, it arrives quietly. A conversation, a book, a class, a decision that appears small in the moment but later changes everything. The years continued moving forward. Roads connected towns. Seasons changed, graduations approached. And somewhere within those years, curiosity continued growing. Not necessarily curiosity about acting. Not yet. Rather, curiosity about people. Curiosity about stories. Curiosity about the countless ways human beings create meaning from their experiences. This curiosity often reveals itself through observation. Some people collect objects. Others collect experiences. Some collect stories. Matthew would eventually become known for telling stories, but first he became interested in listening to them. Family stories, community stories, personal stories, stories told on front porches, around tables, during long drives and beneath open skies. Every community possesses an invisible archive of stories. Some are funny, some are painful, some are repeated so often that they become part of local identity. Growing up surrounded by such stories teaches a person that human lives are far more complicated than they first appear. The evening hours often carried a different atmosphere. Sunlight faded across Texas landscapes. Shadows lengthened, the heat softened. Families returned home from work and school. Porches became gathering places. Conversations unfolded more slowly. There is something important about evenings. Evenings encourage reflection. A person looks backward at the day that has passed while simultaneously looking forward toward tomorrow. For a young man still trying to understand his future, evenings offered space for imagination. Perhaps he imagined travelling. Perhaps he imagined entirely different lives unfolding in distant places. Perhaps he simply enjoyed wondering. Wondering itself can be powerful, not because it produces immediate answers, but because it keeps the mind moving. Many years later, people would see confidence when they looked at Matthew McConaughey. They would hear certainty in interviews and speeches, yet confidence rarely appears fully formed. It develops gradually through countless experiences, observations, mistakes, successes, and lessons. The process begins long before anyone notices. It begins in ordinary places, a school hallway, a football field, a family home, a quiet road stretching toward the horizon. As adolescence slowly gave way to adulthood, new decisions approached. The familiar structures of childhood would not remain forever. Opportunities waited beyond them. The question was not simply where to go. The deeper challenge involved deciding who to become. Many young adults face this moment. The world begins expanding. The map becomes larger. New cities appear. New possibilities emerge. The familiar road reaches an intersection. Standing at such intersections often feels both exciting and unsettling. One path appears practical. Another appears uncertain. A third path may not even be visible yet. For Matthew, the coming years would involve exactly this kind of uncertainty. New environments would replace familiar ones. New influences would reshape old assumptions. New opportunities would challenge previous expectations. But all of that still lay ahead. For now, the story remains in Texas. The evening air cools slightly after sunset. Stadium lights glow in the distance. Cars move along highways carrying people home. Neighborhood windows illuminate one by one as darkness settles across the landscape. Inside one home, conversations continue. Outside, stars begin appearing overhead. Somewhere beyond those stars are places still unseen. Somewhere beyond the horizon are experiences not yet lived. And somewhere beyond the familiar roads of childhood, another chapter is quietly waiting. The young. Man cannot see it yet. The road ahead remains hidden by distance, but morning is coming, and with it, the first steps toward a much larger world. As the years of childhood begin to recede into memory, the landscape changes almost imperceptibly. Familiar streets remain where they have always been. The same trees cast afternoon shadows across sidewalks. The same football fields fill with noise on Friday nights. Yet something inside a young person begins to shift. The places themselves remain unchanged, but the way they are seen becomes different. Matthew McConaughey entered this stage of life with the same mixture of certainty and uncertainty shared by countless young adults. He understood some things about himself. Other things remained hidden. The future existed less as a destination, and more as a collection of possibilities scattered beyond the horizon. Morning sunlight often arrived early across Texas. The heat gathered steadily as the day progressed. Cars moved through neighborhoods. School buses followed familiar routes. People headed toward jobs, classrooms, stores, and offices. Life continued according to routines established long before any individual arrived and destined to continue long after they left. Yet within those routines, people quietly shape their futures. Sometimes it happens through deliberate planning. Sometimes it happens through accidents. Often it happens through a combination of both. As Matthew approached adulthood, education became one of the roads stretching ahead. University represented more than a place to attend classes. It represented movement. It represented leaving behind one chapter while stepping into another whose shape remained uncertain. The transition from home to university often carries a peculiar emotional texture. Excitement mixes with hesitation. Freedom arrives alongside responsibility. Familiar support systems remain present but more distant than before. There is also the subtle realization that life is becoming increasingly self-directed. No one can choose every road for you. Eventually you begin making decisions whose consequences may not fully reveal themselves for years. The campus environment introduced new rhythms. Walkways filled with students carrying books and backpacks. Conversations drifted through courtyards and hallways. Libraries remained quiet while cafeterias buzzed with activity. Classrooms became gathering points for people arriving from different places with different ambitions. The atmosphere felt larger than high school. More possibilities existed. More perspectives existed. More questions existed. University years often become laboratories of identity. Students experiment with interests, beliefs, ambitions, and goals. They discover subjects that energize them and others that leave them indifferent. They encounter ideas capable of altering how they understand the world. For Matthew, these years represented exploration. Not exploration through dramatic events, not exploration through sudden revelations, rather exploration through gradual exposure to new experiences. There is something fascinating about how major life changes often begin quietly. A person attends a class, reads a book, meets someone, travels somewhere unfamiliar. At the time, the moment appears ordinary. Only later does its significance become visible. On campus, days developed their own routines. Mornings might begin with lectures. Afternoons brought studying, conversations, sports, or work. Evenings carried social gatherings, quiet reflection, and preparation for the next day. The cycle repeated itself, day after day, week after week, season after season. Within that repetition, something important was happening. Perspective was expanding. The world was becoming larger. A young man who had spent years moving through familiar environments was now encountering entirely new possibilities, and yet uncertainty remained. Perhaps uncertainty always remains. Many people imagine adulthood as a stage where everything becomes clear. The reality is often different. One question gets answered. Another appears. A door opens. A hallway of additional doors reveals itself. The process continues. At some point during these years, Matthew participated in a study abroad program that took him far from Texas. The experience would become one of those moments that appears simple on the surface, yet carries deeper consequences beneath it. Travel changes perception. It alters scale. The familiar becomes unfamiliar. The assumptions a person carries often become visible only after leaving home. Imagine arriving in a place where routines differ from those you have always known. Different streets, different sounds, different conversations, different expectations. The ordinary suddenly becomes noticeable because it is no longer ordinary. For a curious person, such experiences can be transformative, not because they provide answers, because they provide perspective. Matthew spent time living in Australia during this period. The physical distance from Texas mattered. The psychological distance mattered even more. When people leave familiar environments, they often encounter themselves in unexpected ways. Without the usual routines and expectations surrounding them, they begin seeing certain aspects of their identity more clearly. Questions emerge. What truly matters? What feels meaningful? Which ambitions belong to you and which were inherited from others? The answers rarely arrive immediately. Instead, they develop slowly, like dawn appearing across a horizon. Travel often contains long stretches of quiet observation. Airports, bus stations, roads, train platforms, hotel rooms. The spaces between destinations become places of reflection. A person watches strangers move through their own lives, observes unfamiliar customs, notices details previously overlooked. These observations accumulate. Little by little, they reshape understanding. For Matthew, travel reinforced something that would appear repeatedly throughout his life: the importance of experience itself, not merely achievement, not merely status, experience. Living fully enough to gather stories, learning enough to continue asking questions, remaining curious enough to keep moving. Back in the United States, university life continued. Classes resumed. Assignments returned. Future plans demanded attention. Yet beneath the surface, something had shifted. The horizon appeared different now, larger, more open, less predictable. Many students reach a point where practical questions begin demanding answers. What career should I pursue? What kind of work do I want to do? What life am I trying to build? These questions can feel overwhelming precisely because they matter. The desire to choose correctly often creates anxiety. But life rarely unfolds according to perfect plans. Many meaningful careers begin with unexpected turns. Matthew's own path would soon demonstrate this reality. At the time, acting was not yet the obvious destination. There was no clear roadmap leading directly toward Hollywood. No guarantee of success. No certainty whatsoever. The future remained cloudy, and perhaps that uncertainty made it easier to notice opportunities others might have overlooked. One evening, Imagine a campus growing quiet after sunset. Students return to dormitories and apartments. Streetlights illuminate pathways. The sounds of conversation drift through open windows. A young man walks beneath the night sky, carrying thoughts about the future. The stars above remain distant and silent. The future remains equally silent. Yet both possess a strange attraction. Not because they offer immediate clarity, because they invite exploration. Throughout history, many people have stood beneath night skies wondering what comes next. Some become teachers, some become entrepreneurs, some become scientists, some become artists. Few know their destination while standing at the beginning. Matthew belonged to this tradition of uncertainty. His future identity had not yet solidified. The person the world would eventually recognize remained largely invisible. The transformation had begun, but it was incomplete, and perhaps that is true of everyone. We often imagine identity as fixed. In reality, identity remains under construction far longer than we realize. A person becomes themselves gradually, through choices, through mistakes, through risks, through experiences gathered along the way. The university years offered many such experiences. Conversations with friends stretched late into the night. Professors introduced new ways of thinking. Books opened unexpected doors. Travel broadened perspective. The pieces accumulated, slowly, patiently, like stones arranged one at a time. The structure forming remained invisible until much later. There were likely moments when the future felt exciting, other moments when it felt intimidating. Perhaps moments when both emotions existed simultaneously. This combination often accompanies periods of transition. Excitement because possibilities exist. Fear because possibilities require decisions. Eventually university would end. The campus paths would become memories. The classrooms would fall behind. The next chapter would begin. Yet before that chapter arrived, one final period of uncertainty remained. A period where possibility still outweighed certainty, where questions outnumbered answers, where the road ahead stretched beyond sight. The evening settles across campus once more. Windows glow softly in distant buildings. A breeze moves through trees lining the walkways. Students continue toward futures they cannot yet imagine. Among them walks a young man carrying experiences gathered from Texas, from family, from classrooms, from football fields, and from distant places across the ocean. He does not yet know which opportunity will change everything. He does not yet know which conversation will redirect his path. He does not yet know that an entirely different world is quietly preparing to open its doors. For now, he simply keeps moving forward. One step, one day, one choice at a time, and somewhere beyond the edge of campus another road is waiting. The road waiting beyond university did not arrive with a spotlight. There was no dramatic announcement, no voice from above declaring a destiny. Like many important turns in life, it appeared through a sequence of ordinary events that only later seemed extraordinary. The campus years were ending. Students packed belongings into cars and trucks. Apartments emptied. Textbooks disappeared into boxes. Friendships that had felt permanent suddenly faced distance and change. The familiar rhythms of university life faded behind them as graduates moved toward uncertain futures. Matthew stood at that threshold as many young adults do, looking forward and backward at the same time. Behind him were years of learning, exploration, travel, and growth. Ahead lay a future whose details remained unwritten. The challenge now was deciding what came next. For a period, the answer was not entirely clear. The world often expects certainty from young adults. Family members ask questions. Friends compare plans. Society quietly suggests that everyone should already know exactly where they are going. Yet many people do not. Many people move through a season of searching, a season where possibilities exist, but none feel fully settled. Matthew entered that season. The days no longer followed classroom schedules. Mornings arrived without lectures waiting. Afternoons stretched differently. The structure of university disappeared, leaving open space where decisions now had to be made independently. Open space can feel uncomfortable. It can also be valuable. Without structure, a person often discovers what naturally draws their attention, what interests them, what energizes them, what refuses to leave their thoughts. Somewhere during this period, a chance encounter occurred that would eventually redirect the course of his life. Chance encounters are curious things. Most conversations fade into memory almost immediately. Others linger. A few alter everything. The setting itself was unremarkable. Not a grand theatre, not a famous studio, not a glamorous Hollywood event. Just an ordinary place where two people happened to cross paths. The conversation turned toward film, toward storytelling, toward possibilities that had not previously seemed realistic. Sometimes another person sees a road before we do, not because they understand our future perfectly, because they notice possibilities we have overlooked. The idea of acting entered Matthew's life gradually. At first, it was not a certainty. It was a possibility among many. Yet certain ideas possess unusual staying power. They return repeatedly. They refuse to disappear. Days pass, weeks pass. The idea remains. Something about storytelling felt compelling. Something about performance felt intriguing. Not necessarily fame, not necessarily celebrity. Storytelling itself, the opportunity to step into different lives, different perspectives, different experiences. Human beings have told stories for thousands of years, around campfires, in books, on stages, through films. Stories allow people to explore questions that cannot always be answered directly. Perhaps that is why storytelling attracts curious people. It offers endless opportunities to examine what it means to be human. The possibility of acting continued growing. Soon it became more than a passing thought. It became a direction, not a guarantee, a direction. The decision to pursue acting did not instantly transform life into a success story. In reality, most creative careers begin with uncertainty. Opportunities remain scarce. Competition remains intense. Progress often feels slow. Hollywood may appear glamorous from a distance, but every actor begins as an unknown. Every career starts before recognition arrives. Matthew entered that reality. The first steps were neither grand nor dramatic. They involved effort, learning, persistence, observation, the work of becoming. Imagine arriving in a new city where countless people share similar dreams. Some want to become actors, others want to become writers, directors, musicians, artists. The atmosphere carries ambition but also uncertainty. Every coffee shop contains conversations about opportunities. Every apartment contains someone hoping for a breakthrough. Every day brings both possibility and disappointment. The entertainment industry can be unpredictable. Doors open unexpectedly. Doors close unexpectedly. A person learns quickly that talent alone does not guarantee success. Timing matters. Luck matters. Preparation matters. Persistence matters. Matthew began navigating this environment one opportunity at a time. Auditions became part of life. Waiting became part of life. Learning became part of life. There is a particular emotional experience associated with auditions. A person enters a room, performs, leaves, then waits. The outcome remains beyond their control. The process repeats, again and again and again. Patience becomes essential. So does resilience. Many opportunities lead nowhere. Many promising moments fade. The challenge is continuing forward despite uncertainty. Those early years demanded exactly that. The glamorous image often associated with Hollywood rarely includes the waiting, the small apartments, the financial concerns, the unanswered phone calls, the endless uncertainty. Yet these experiences shape people. They reveal motivation. They reveal commitment. They reveal whether someone truly wants the path they have chosen. Matthew continued moving forward. One opportunity led to another. Small roles appeared, learning continued, observation continued. The young man who had spent years watching people now found himself applying those observations professionally. Acting requires attention, not merely to dialogue, to behaviour, how people walk, how they sit, how they react, how they conceal emotions, how they reveal them. The smallest details often matter most. An actor becomes a student of humanity, watching, listening, absorbing, transforming observation into performance. As opportunities increased, the environment surrounding him changed. Film sets replaced classrooms, trailers replaced dormitories, scripts replaced textbooks. The learning process continued, but the classroom looked different now. Early mornings became common. Film crews arrived before sunrise. Equipment filled locations, cables stretched across floors, lights illuminated spaces that would appear entirely natural on screen. Hundreds of people worked together to create moments that audiences would later experience as effortless. The reality behind filmmaking is surprisingly practical. Long hours, preparation, patience, repetition. The camera sees only a small portion of the work happening around it. Between scenes, there is waiting, adjustments, conversations, observation. Actors often spend considerable time sitting quietly between takes, time that encourages reflection, time that encourages watching people work, watching stories take shape, watching small moments become something larger. One of the earliest major opportunities arrived through a film called Dazed and Confused. The role itself was not enormous. The future significance remained unknown. Yet some opportunities possess unusual momentum. They create movement. They open additional doors. The performance attracted attention, not explosive attention, not overnight superstardom, something more important. Recognition. Recognition that this young actor possessed presence, authenticity, a distinctive voice, the ability to hold attention. Afterward, additional opportunities followed. The path remained uncertain, but progress became visible. One film led to another, one connection led to another. The road continued extending forward. There is a temptation when examining successful careers to focus exclusively on breakthrough moments. Yet careers are rarely built by breakthroughs alone. They are built through accumulation. One experience added to another, one lesson added to another, one opportunity building upon the previous opportunity. The process resembles constructing a road. A road does not appear instantly. It develops piece by piece, gradually, patiently. The same is true of careers. As Matthew moved deeper into acting, he continued carrying elements of Texas with him. The open road mentality, the curiosity, the observational habits, the comfort with uncertainty. Success had not fully arrived yet. Recognition was growing. Momentum was growing. Possibilities were expanding. Yet the future remained unwritten. That uncertainty would remain an important companion throughout his life, not because uncertainty is pleasant, because uncertainty creates room for discovery. The young actor found himself standing between two worlds. One world belonged to the person he had been. The other belonged to the person he was becoming. The transition was underway. The destination remained unclear. Film sets stretched across cities and locations. Scripts arrived. Characters emerged. Experiences accumulated. The story continued moving forward, and somewhere beyond the opportunities already visible, a much larger chapter waited patiently. A chapter involving success, recognition, fame, and questions that success itself could never fully answer. The evening settles over a film set after a long day of shooting. Crew members pack equipment into trucks. Lights disappear one by one. the location gradually returns to silence. An actor walks toward his trailer beneath a darkening sky. Tomorrow another scene will be filmed, another story will continue, another road will unfold. For now the night remains quiet, and the horizon still holds more than can be seen. Morning arrives differently on a film set than it does almost anywhere else. The day often begins before sunrise. Trucks appear in the darkness. Crew members unload equipment beneath portable lights. Coffee cups send small streams of steam into cool air. Generators hum softly in the background, while makeup trailers glow like small islands of light against the surrounding night. Long before audiences see a finished scene, an entire temporary world must be built. Matthew became increasingly familiar with this rhythm. The early arrivals, the waiting, the rehearsals, the long stretches of concentration followed by brief moments when the camera finally rolled. The work itself remained surprisingly ordinary in many ways. People showed up, they prepared, they solved problems, they worked together, then they repeated the process the next day. Yet something else was happening beneath the routine. Momentum was building. The years that followed brought opportunities that gradually expanded both visibility and responsibility. Roles became larger, expectations became greater. More people began recognizing his name. More people began recognizing his face. Success rarely arrives all at once. It approaches in stages. A role gains attention. A second role confirms that the first was not an accident. A third role expands possibilities. Then one day, a person realizes they are no longer unknown. For Matthew, this process unfolded steadily throughout the 1990s. The young actor who had once waited anxiously for auditions found himself increasingly occupied with actual work. Scripts arrived more frequently, meetings became more common, the industry began paying attention. Yet the atmosphere around success often feels very different from the atmosphere surrounding it from a distance. Many people imagine success as a finish line. In reality, it often introduces entirely new questions. The opportunities become larger, the choices become more complicated, the stakes become higher. A career begins gathering momentum of its own. One successful project leads to another offer, then another, then another. The challenge slowly shifts from finding opportunities to choosing between them. This transition can be surprisingly difficult. When opportunities are scarce, nearly every door seems worth opening. When opportunities become abundant, choosing one path often means closing several others. The late 1990s brought exactly this kind of expansion. Film sets became increasingly familiar territory. Hotels became temporary homes. Airports became routine. Suitcases remained packed. Schedules stretched across cities, states, and countries. The life of a working actor often involves movement, not the leisurely movement of vacations, professional movement, flights before sunrise, car rides after midnight, weeks spent in unfamiliar locations, temporary apartments, temporary routines, temporary communities built around each production. There is a unique feeling associated with hotel rooms. The furniture remains identical from one guest to the next. The artwork on the walls rarely feels personal. The view changes depending on location, but the atmosphere often remains similar. Many travellers describe hotel rooms as places that exist slightly outside ordinary life, a pause between destinations, a temporary stop along a longer journey. Actors often spend considerable portions of their lives in such spaces. Matthew did as well, and during these years, another habit continued quietly developing in the background. Journaling, the simple act of writing observations, experiences, ideas, questions, and reflections into notebooks. The practice would eventually become one of the defining habits of his life. Long before audiences knew about those journals, they accompanied him through countless experiences. Hotel rooms, airports, trailers, quiet mornings, late nights, moments between destinations. Journals offer something unique, Unlike conversations, they do not interrupt. Unlike audiences, they do not judge. Unlike schedules, they do not hurry. A journal simply waits. And in that waiting, people often discover thoughts they did not realize they possessed. Matthew continued writing, not because he knew those writings would someday become important, because the habit itself felt valuable. Observation transformed into reflection, experience transformed into understanding, or at least an attempt at understanding. Meanwhile, his professional life continued expanding. Audiences responded positively to his presence on screen. There was something distinctive about him. Part of it was charisma. Part of it was authenticity. Part of it was difficult to define. Some performers possess a quality that feels less like performance and more like presence. They seem comfortable occupying space, comfortable being observed, comfortable remaining themselves even while portraying someone else. Matthew developed a reputation for exactly this kind of presence. The industry noticed, audiences noticed, filmmakers noticed. Success became increasingly visible. Magazine covers appeared, interviews became more frequent, public recognition grew. Yet fame often arrives gradually enough that the person experiencing it may not fully notice the transition. At first, a few strangers recognize you, then more. Then recognition becomes expected. Eventually, privacy itself begins changing. Ordinary experiences become slightly less ordinary. A walk through an airport, a visit to a restaurant, a stop at a gas station. Simple moments begin carrying the possibility of recognition. For some people, this attention feels exhilarating. For others, exhausting. Most experience a mixture of both. Matthew navigated these changes while continuing to work. Film after film, set after set, year after year. Then another phase began emerging. A phase that would define much of how audiences viewed him for years. The romantic comedy era. Hollywood has a tendency to place successful actors into categories. The industry values familiarity. When audiences respond positively to a particular type of role, similar opportunities often follow, again and again. Sometimes this benefits performers. Sometimes it limits them. Initially, the romantic comedy roles brought significant success. The films reached large audiences. Viewers enjoyed them. Studios embraced them. The formula appeared to work. Movie posters appeared in theatres across the country. Billboards rose beside highways. Television advertisements promoted upcoming releases. The actor's visibility continued increasing. From the outside, everything appeared ideal. Success, popularity, financial stability, recognition. The very outcomes many aspiring actors dream about. Yet life often becomes most interesting when external success and internal experience begin diverging. The world may see certainty. The individual may feel questions. The world may see arrival. The individual may feel movement. Matthew continued working steadily throughout these years. The films performed well. The opportunities remained abundant. The professional machine functioned smoothly. But somewhere beneath the visible success, another process had begun. A quieter process, a more personal process. Questions, not dramatic questions, not public questions, private ones. Questions about direction, questions about purpose, questions about what kind of work felt meaningful. Success can answer many practical concerns. It cannot answer every question. Sometimes success actually creates new questions by removing old ones. The struggle to survive becomes less urgent. The struggle to understand becomes more visible. Imagine an evening after filming has ended. A hotel room overlooks a distant city. Traffic moves below in streams of white and red lights. The day is finished. Tomorrow's schedule already waits. Yet for a few hours, everything becomes quiet. A notebook rests on a table. The room is still. Outside, the city continues moving. Inside, a person reflects. These moments rarely appear in headlines, they rarely become interviews, yet they often shape lives more profoundly than public events. The romantic comedy years continued bringing success. Audiences laughed, studios profited, careers advanced, everything seemed to be working, and perhaps that was precisely why the deeper questions refused to disappear. The road ahead remained visible, predictable even, more of the same opportunities, more of the same roles, more success, more familiarity. Many people would have accepted that path without hesitation. Many would have considered it the safest option, the most logical option, the expected option. Yet some individuals remain restless when a road becomes too predictable, not dissatisfied, simply curious. Curious about what exists beyond the next horizon, curious about roads not yet travelled, curious enough to consider turning away from certainty. That curiosity was growing, slowly, quietly, patiently. The audience could not see it. Most industry observers could not see it. But change was approaching. Not sudden change, not dramatic change. The kind of change that begins internally long before it becomes visible externally. The sun sets beyond another filming location. Equipment is packed away. Trailers sit quietly beneath the fading light. Crew members head home. The day's work is complete. An actor walks alone for a few moments before returning to his room. The road ahead appears successful, clear, comfortable. Yet somewhere beyond that road, another path is waiting. And soon, a choice will have to be made. There are moments in certain lives when everything appears to be working. The career is successful. The opportunities continue arriving. The public approval remains strong. The future seems predictable in the most reassuring way possible. From the outside, these moments often look like destinations. From the inside, they can sometimes feel like intersections. Matthew McConaughey found himself standing at one of those intersections. The years of romantic comedies had established him as a recognizable and dependable Hollywood star. Producers knew what audiences expected from him. Studios knew how to market him. Scripts continued arriving. The machine functioned efficiently. Yet beneath the smooth operation of professional success, a quieter conversation had begun. Not a conversation with agents, not a conversation with audiences, a conversation with himself. These conversations rarely happen all at once. They unfold gradually. A thought appears, then returns again. Eventually it becomes impossible to ignore. The question was not whether he could continue doing the work that had made him successful. He could. The question was whether he wanted to spend the next chapter of his life repeating the same pattern. Hollywood possesses its own gravity. Success creates momentum. Momentum creates expectations. Expectations create routines. Over time, routines can become identities. People begin expecting certain things from you. You begin expecting certain things from yourself. Breaking away from that cycle requires courage, not because the alternative is guaranteed to succeed, because it is not. Imagine a highway stretching perfectly straight toward the horizon. The road is smooth, the weather is clear, the destination is known. Most drivers would continue forward. Then imagine noticing a smaller road branching away from the highway. A road with fewer signs, less certainty, no visible guarantee regarding where it leads. Choosing that road requires something different. It requires trust, not in the destination, in the willingness to explore. Matthew increasingly felt drawn toward that smaller road. The challenge was that exploring it would involve risk, real risk, professional risk, financial risk, reputational risk. The industry had already decided who he was, or at least who it believed he was. Changing that perception would not be easy. Many actors become trapped by success. A particular role succeeds, then similar roles follow, then more. Eventually, the actor becomes associated with a specific image that proves difficult to escape. Audiences grow comfortable. Studios grow comfortable. The actor may become uncomfortable. The difficulty lies in convincing others that a different version exists. a version they have not yet seen. Matthew began recognizing this challenge. The realization did not arrive dramatically. It emerged through observation, through experience, through repeated exposure to the same types of opportunities. At some point he understood that if he continued accepting similar roles indefinitely, the future would become increasingly predictable. Predictability can provide comfort. It can also limit growth. Growth often requires uncertainty, and uncertainty was exactly what he was considering. The decision that followed would become one of the defining choices of his career. He stepped away, not entirely from acting, from the path he'd been following, from the roles that kept arriving, from the expectations that had quietly surrounded him. The decision confused many observers. From the outside, it appeared irrational. Why walk away from success? Why risk momentum? Why leave a position that so many people spend years trying to reach? The answers were not simple, and perhaps they were not entirely practical. Life decisions rarely are. Some choices emerge from intuition, some emerge from dissatisfaction, others emerge from curiosity. Often they emerge from a mixture of all three. Matthew entered a period that would later become famous for its uncertainty. Offers continued arriving. Many of them looked familiar. Many promised comfort. Many promised continuation. He declined them again and again and again. Saying no repeatedly can be surprisingly difficult. Most people spend years trying to create opportunities. Turning opportunities away feels unnatural, especially when the future remains unclear. Yet every meaningful decision involves both acceptance and refusal. To choose one road is to reject countless others. The years that followed contained a different atmosphere. The schedule slowed. The professional momentum changed. The certainty disappeared. Life became quieter. And within that quietness, other parts of existence gained space. Family, reflection, writing, observation, travel. The simple experience of living without constantly moving from one production to the next. The entertainment industry thrives on visibility, yet there can be tremendous value in temporary invisibility. Without constant public attention, a person sometimes hears their own thoughts more clearly. The noise decreases. The signal becomes easier to detect. Matthew continued writing in his journals. The habit remained steady. Pages accumulated. Observations accumulated. Experiences accumulated. Many people imagine transformation as a dramatic event, a sudden revelation, a life-changing moment. More often, transformation resembles a gradual shift in perspective. Tiny adjustments repeated over time. The journals became companions throughout this period. Hotel rooms appeared less frequently. Home appeared more frequently. The pace changed. Mornings unfolded differently. Days contained more space. The world slowed down. Or perhaps he simply became more capable of noticing it. There is a particular feeling associated with stepping away from expectations. Initially it can feel liberating, then unsettling, then liberating again. Without familiar routines, a person must redefine themselves. Who are you when the schedule changes? Who are you when the applause disappears? Who are you when nobody is telling you what comes next? These questions are not exclusive to actors. They appear throughout life. Career changes, retirement, relocation, parenthood, loss, growth. Every major transition invites similar reflection. Matthew moved through this season patiently. The uncertainty remained real. There was no guarantee that the industry would welcome him back in a different form, no guarantee that audiences would follow, no guarantee that the gamble would succeed. The possibility of failure existed, and failure often becomes more intimidating after success. When a person is unknown, failure feels private. When a person is famous, failure feels public. The stakes become larger. Yet some roads remain worth exploring despite risk, perhaps because of risk. Imagine an afternoon at a ranch. The sunlight stretches across open land. Wind moves through grass. The horizon remains distant. No cameras, no film crew, no audience. Just space, silence, perspective. Places like this encourage reflection. The landscape itself seems to slow thought into something calmer, something less urgent. A person notices details, the movement of clouds, the changing angle of sunlight, the sound of distant birds. Life becomes simpler, not easier, simpler. The period away from familiar Hollywood expectations allowed Matthew to reconnect with aspects of himself that existed beyond acting. Husband, father, writer, observer, traveller, student of experience. The industry continued moving while he remained largely outside its usual flow. New actors emerged, new trends appeared, the machine continued operating. Meanwhile, he waited. Not passively, deliberately, waiting for opportunities that felt different, waiting for roles capable of challenging him, waiting for work that aligned with the direction he hoped to pursue. Patience can be difficult when the outcome remains uncertain. The temptation to return to familiar territory often becomes strong. Comfort offers reassurance. Uncertainty offers possibility. The balance between them shapes many important decisions. Months passed, then years. The road remained unclear, yet somewhere beyond the visible horizon, change was approaching. Not because he demanded it, not because he forced it, because preparation and opportunity were slowly moving toward each other. The world could not see it yet. Most people could not. But the chapter of uncertainty was nearing its end, and another chapter, one involving reinvention, challenge, and some of the most celebrated work of his career, was beginning to emerge from the distance. The evening settles across the landscape. The sky turns gold, then orange, then deep blue. A journal rests open on a nearby table. The pages hold years of observations, years of questions, years of roads travelled and roads avoided. The future remains unwritten. Yet for the first time in a long while, something new seems to be approaching from beyond the horizon. Not certainty. Something more interesting. Possibility. Possibility rarely announces itself loudly. More often, it appears quietly. A phone call, a script arriving in the mail, a conversation that lasts only a few minutes, a door opening after years of remaining closed. The years Matthew McConaughey spent stepping away from familiar expectations had created space. Space for reflection, space for patience, space for uncertainty. The outside world may have interpreted that period as a pause, but beneath the surface something important had been taking shape. He had not stopped moving. He had simply changed direction, and eventually that direction led toward opportunities unlike the ones he had left behind. The scripts that began arriving felt different. The characters felt different. The risks felt different. They demanded more. Not more fame, more depth, more complexity, more willingness to explore uncomfortable territory. For years, audiences had become accustomed to seeing him in a particular way. Now they would begin seeing another side entirely. The transition did not happen overnight. Transformation rarely does. It happened role by role, choice by choice, project by project, like a traveller gradually leaving one landscape and entering another. At first, the changes may have seemed subtle, a different type of character, a different tone, a different challenge. Then the pattern became visible. The actor was reinventing himself. Hollywood occasionally allows reinvention, but it never guarantees it. The industry often rewards familiarity because familiarity feels safe. Reinvention introduces uncertainty. It requires audiences to reconsider assumptions. It requires studios to take chances. It requires actors to risk failure. Yet risk and growth often travel together. One of the first signs of this new chapter emerged through projects that demanded emotional complexity rather than simple charm. Characters became less predictable. Stories became more layered. The performances carried weight that differed from the work audiences had previously associated with him. Critics noticed. Audiences noticed. Filmmakers noticed. The years of patience were beginning to bear fruit. Imagine arriving on a film set during this period. The atmosphere feels familiar yet different. The cameras remain, the lights remain, the trailers remain, yet the emotional texture has changed. The work now asks different questions. The characters carry heavier burdens. The stories reach deeper places. An actor who spent years studying people now finds opportunities to use that understanding in new ways. Preparation became increasingly important. Scripts received careful attention. Characters required exploration. Questions filled notebooks. Observations accumulated. The journals that had accompanied him through years of travel and reflection continued serving their purpose. Writing remained a private companion to public work. Many people assume acting begins when the camera starts rolling. In reality, much of it begins earlier, in silence, an actor reading alone, thinking, researching, imagining, exploring motivations and possibilities, trying to understand another human being from the inside. Matthew approached these opportunities with seriousness. The years away had sharpened something, not merely ambition, clarity. He no longer seemed interested in doing more work. He seemed interested in doing meaningful work. There is an important distinction between the two. One concerns quantity, the other concerns purpose. As the reinvention continued, certain performances became milestones. Projects like The Lincoln Lawyer, Mud, and later Dallas Buyers Club demonstrated the breadth of what he could do. Each role carried its own challenges. Each demanded something different. Each moved him further from the image that had once defined him. The success of these performances did more than change public perception. It validated a difficult decision. Years earlier, he had walked away from certainty. Now uncertainty was producing results. Not because uncertainty itself possesses magical qualities, because he had been willing to endure it long enough for something new to emerge. The story of reinvention often looks inspiring when viewed backward. Living through it feels very different. Living through it involves doubt, patience, questions, moments when the outcome remains invisible. The eventual success does not erase those experiences, it grows from them. One of the defining projects of this period was Dallas Buyers Club. The role demanded significant physical and emotional commitment. Preparation became intense, the transformation attracted attention. But beneath the visible changes was something more important: commitment, a willingness to serve the story completely. The film resonated deeply with audiences and critics alike. Recognition followed, awards followed, praise followed. Yet if you step back from the headlines and ceremonies, another image emerges. Not a red carpet, not a trophy. A man sitting quietly with a script years earlier, choosing a road whose destination remained uncertain. That decision mattered as much as any award, perhaps more. Awards celebrate outcomes, choices create outcomes. The reinvention continued expanding. New projects arrived, directors sought him out, audiences responded enthusiastically. The industry began viewing him differently, not because he requested it, because he demonstrated it. The most convincing argument often comes through action. Performance by performance, he showed what had always been possible. Meanwhile, life beyond acting continued evolving. Family remained central, children grew, time passed. The balance between professional work and personal life became increasingly important. Success can consume enormous amounts of attention if allowed. Maintaining perspective requires deliberate effort. Many people spend years pursuing achievements only to discover that achievements alone feel incomplete. Relationships matter, experiences matter, presence matters. Matthew often spoke about family not as a separate category from success, but as part of a meaningful life. The distinction matters. A career can be extraordinary, yet careers exist within lives, not the other way around. During this period, mornings often began differently than they once had. There were still scripts, still schedules, still travel. But there was also family breakfast, school events, ordinary moments that remain invisible to public audiences. The ordinary moments often become the most meaningful. A conversation around a table, a walk outdoors, a shared laugh, a quiet evening at home. These experiences rarely generate headlines, yet they form the foundation beneath everything else. The journals continued growing thicker, year after year, page after page, observations about life, questions about purpose, stories gathered from travel, work, family, and reflection. Writing remained an anchor, a way of processing experience, a way of preserving moments before they disappeared into memory. Many people move through life so quickly that experiences blur together. Journaling slows the process. It creates opportunities to notice, to remember, to understand, or at least to try. As the years advanced, Matthew increasingly found himself speaking publicly about lessons learned along the way, not because he claimed to possess all the answers, because experience naturally generates perspective. Audiences listened. Some were interested in acting, others were interested in life itself. The appeal often stemmed from authenticity. His observations rarely felt rehearsed into perfection. They felt lived, collected over years of mistakes, successes, detours, and discoveries, like entries gathered across thousands of journal pages. Imagine an evening after filming concludes. The location is emptied. Equipment rests quietly in trucks. The sky darkens overhead. An actor sits alone for a few minutes before leaving. The day's work is finished. Tomorrow will bring another scene, another challenge, another opportunity. But for now, everything is still. In the distance, a road stretches beyond sight. Years earlier, he chose to leave a familiar highway and follow a less certain path. That choice changed everything. Yet the road itself continues, because reinvention is not a destination, it is a practice, a willingness to remain curious, a willingness to continue growing, a willingness to keep moving even when the horizon remains partially hidden. And beyond that horizon, another chapter is waiting, one that leads not toward greater fame, but toward deeper reflection. As the years moved forward, the pace of life began changing again, not necessarily slowing, simply changing. The ambitions that dominate one chapter of life rarely remain identical in the next. What feels urgent at 20 often feels different at 40. What appears important during years of building a career may shift once that career has already been built. For Matthew McConaughey, the period following reinvention brought a different kind of exploration. The search was no longer focused primarily on proving himself as an actor. That work had largely been done. The challenge now involved understanding how all the different pieces of life fit together: career, family, purpose, responsibility, curiosity, growth. The questions became broader, perhaps quieter as well. Early mornings remained important. Many people discover that morning possesses a unique quality, unavailable at other times of day. Before phones begin ringing, before schedules become crowded, before obligations demand attention. There exists a brief period when the world feels calm enough to think clearly. Matthew often spoke about reflection, observation, and the value of paying attention. Not paying attention in a dramatic sense, simply noticing. Noticing where life is leading, noticing habits, noticing patterns, noticing whether one's actions remain aligned with deeper values. These are not questions most people answer once, they return repeatedly. Like roads that seem familiar but reveal something new each time they are travelled, the journals remained close at hand. Years earlier, writing had begun as a habit. Now it had become a lifelong companion. Thousands upon thousands of pages accumulated, notes, stories, ideas, reflections, memories, questions, observations recorded before they disappeared. The practice itself reflected something important about his approach to life. He was not merely experiencing events, he was examining them, trying to understand them, trying to learn from them, trying to preserve them. A journal creates a conversation across time. The person writing today leaves messages for the person reading years later. Patterns emerge. Growth becomes visible. Lessons reveal themselves gradually. The pages become a map of sorts, not a map showing where to go, a map showing where a person has already been. Imagine opening a notebook filled over decades. The handwriting changes slightly, the concerns change, the ambitions change, certain themes return repeatedly. Some questions eventually find answers, others remain unresolved. Together they form a portrait more honest than any public image. The public often sees finished versions of people, finished speeches, finished performances, finished accomplishments. The journals contain something different. The unfinished process, the uncertainty, the exploration, the mistakes, the evolution. As family life continued growing, another layer of meaning emerged. Parenthood often alters perspective. Time itself begins feeling different. Years move differently. Priorities shift. Success acquires new definitions. The future no longer belongs exclusively to the individual. It becomes shared. A family introduces its own rhythms. School mornings, family dinners, vacations, conversations, traditions, ordinary moments repeated often enough to become memories. Many public figures spend years living under observation. Family life offers a different experience, not performance, presence, not audience, participation, not visibility, connection. Matthew frequently spoke about fatherhood with gratitude and seriousness, not because it simplified life, because it deepened it. The responsibility mattered. The opportunity mattered. The relationships mattered. Life expanded beyond personal achievement. The horizon widened again. Throughout these years, he continued moving between different worlds. One day might involve a film set. Another might involve a ranch. Another might involve a public event. Another might involve simply spending time at home. The transitions themselves became part of life. Few people live entirely within one environment. Most move between multiple identities: professional, personal, public, private. The challenge lies in carrying authenticity between them, remaining the same person regardless of setting. That challenge seemed increasingly important to him. The older a person becomes, the less energy remains available for pretending. Authenticity becomes practical, not merely philosophical, a simpler way to live. The years also brought opportunities to speak publicly about experiences gathered along the journey. Interviews evolved into conversations. Conversations evolved into reflections. Audiences often listened because the observations felt grounded, not theoretical, experienced. The difference matters. Advice offered from experience carries a different texture than advice offered from abstraction. One emerges from living. The other emerges from thinking. The strongest insights usually contain both. Meanwhile, the notebooks continued filling, one page after another, 1 year after another. The accumulation itself became remarkable. A lifetime documented not through photographs alone, but through words. Words captured in airports, hotels, trailers, homes, road trips, quiet mornings, late nights. The road motif that appeared throughout his life remained present, perhaps because roads naturally symbolize movement, not arrival, movement. A road suggests continuation. One destination leads to another. One chapter leads to another. No matter how successful a person becomes, the road continues. The landscape changes. The traveller changes. The road remains. At some point, those journals began inspiring a larger project. The idea emerged slowly, as many meaningful ideas do. Years of observations had accumulated, years of lessons, years of stories. Eventually, the material itself seemed to suggest a book, not a traditional celebrity memoir focused on achievements and milestones. Something more reflective, something closer to a conversation. The project would eventually become Greenlights. The title itself reflected a recurring theme: recognizing opportunities, recognizing moments when life seems to signal movement forward. The book drew heavily from decades of journals. The pages that had quietly accompanied him across years and continents finally emerged into public view. Readers responded enthusiastically, perhaps because the material felt personal, perhaps because it felt honest, perhaps because people recognize parts of their own journeys within it. The success of the book revealed something interesting. Stories do not belong exclusively to actors, or filmmakers, or writers. Stories belong to everyone. Human beings naturally seek meaning through narrative. We understand our lives partly through the stories we tell ourselves about where we have been and where we're going. Matthew's journals had allowed him to examine that narrative over many years. The book simply extended the conversation. Imagine sitting at a desk late in the evening. The house has grown quiet, a lamp illuminates scattered pages. Outside, darkness settles across the landscape. Inside, memories emerge through writing. Old roads, old choices, old questions. Some of them now make sense. Others remain mysterious. That is often how reflection works. It provides understanding, not complete understanding, enough understanding to continue moving. As public speaking became a larger part of his life, audiences encountered another aspect of his personality. Not the actor portraying characters, the observer discussing experiences, the storyteller examining lessons, the curious traveller looking backward and forward simultaneously. The role suited him naturally. Not because he possessed all the answers, because he remained interested in the questions. Curiosity often survives longer than certainty. Certainty tends to become rigid. Curiosity remains alive, open, flexible, willing to learn. The road continued stretching ahead. Projects came and went. Years passed. Children grew older. The journals grew thicker. The questions evolved. Yet certain themes remained consistent. Attention, presence, experience, growth, movement, and the willingness to remain curious even after achieving many of the things people spent their lives pursuing. The evening sky darkens above an open landscape. The horizon remains visible long after the sun disappears. A notebook rests nearby, its pages filled with decades of observations. The road behind stretches farther than it once did. The road ahead remains unseen, and perhaps that is exactly as it should be, because another chapter still waits beyond the next rise in the distance. The older a person becomes, the more interesting the horizon can seem, not because it grows closer, because it remains distant. There is something reassuring about that. The horizon reminds us that life is never entirely finished. No matter how many accomplishments accumulate, no matter how many chapters have already been written, there is always another landscape beyond the one currently visible. For Matthew McConaughey, later life has carried a different texture than the years of ambition and reinvention that came before. The urgency has changed, not disappeared, changed. Many people spend their younger years trying to establish themselves. They build careers, they prove capabilities, they pursue opportunities. Their attention focuses primarily on movement forward. Later, another challenge emerges, understanding what all that movement meant. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet way. The challenge becomes less about acceleration and more about awareness. Imagine an early morning before sunrise. The house remains silent. The air feels cool. Outside, darkness still covers the landscape, though hints of dawn have begun appearing at the edge of the sky. A familiar notebook rests nearby. Coffee sends a thin stream of steam upward. The world has not fully awakened. These are the kinds of moments that often invite reflection. Not because anything extraordinary is happening, because nothing is. The absence of noise creates room for thought. For decades, Matthew has moved through dramatically different environments: Texas towns, college campuses, Australian streets, film sets, award ceremonies, hotels, airports, ranches, writing desks. Each environment offered something different. Each left its own imprint. Taken together, they form a life that appears remarkably varied. Yet when viewed closely, certain themes connect them all: observation, curiosity, movement, the willingness to leave one road for another, again and again. Many people eventually reach a stage where they become interested in legacy. The word itself can sound grand, sometimes too grand. In reality, legacy often consists of smaller things than people imagine. A conversation remembered, a lesson passed along, a child raised with care, a story shared honestly, a life lived with intention. The public often associates legacy with achievement. The private reality usually involves relationships. Family remains central to that reality. The years continue moving forward. Children grow. Their personalities become clearer. Their interests develop. The parent who once guided every step gradually becomes an observer of independent lives unfolding. There is beauty in that transition. There is also humility, a reminder that life extends beyond any single individual. The story continues after us. It continued before us. We simply contribute our chapter. Matthew has often seemed comfortable with that perspective, comfortable acknowledging that fame, while unusual, remains only one aspect of existence. The person recognized by strangers is not the entirety of the person. There are still family dinners, still ordinary conversations, still quiet mornings, still moments invisible to the public. Those moments matter, perhaps more than most people realize. A life composed entirely of public experiences would feel incomplete. Private moments provide balance. They provide grounding. They remind people who they are when nobody's watching. Throughout his journey, writing remained one of the most consistent companions. The journals continue. The habit continues. The conversation across time continues. Some entries likely capture major events. Others probably record details that appeared insignificant at the time. The interesting thing about memory is that significance often changes. A seemingly small moment becomes meaningful years later. A major event fades unexpectedly. No one can perfectly predict what will matter. Perhaps that is why recording experiences feels valuable. Not every observation reveals its importance immediately. Imagine opening a journal from 20 years earlier. The handwriting belongs to a younger version of yourself. The concerns belong to a younger version of yourself. The dreams belong to a younger version of yourself. Yet the connection remains. The pages preserve a dialogue between different versions of the same person. The road continues, but the traveller changes. Few things illustrate growth more clearly. Public speaking, writing, acting, and storytelling all share something fundamental. They involve communication. One person attempts to share experience. Another person listens. The exchange creates connection. Perhaps that explains why storytelling remains so important throughout Matthew's life. Not because stories entertain, though they do, because stories connect. A story allows one person to borrow another person's perspective for a little while, to see through different eyes, to experience different possibilities, to consider different questions. Film accomplishes this. Books accomplish this. Conversations accomplish this. Even journals accomplish this, though the audience may initially be only the writer. As years pass, perspective changes the meaning of success. Success in youth often centers around acquisition, opportunities, recognition, achievement. Success later in life often centers around appreciation, presence, connection, understanding. The shift happens gradually, almost invisibly. One day a person realizes that some of the moments they value most cannot be measured. A conversation with family, a walk at sunset, a quiet morning, a page written honestly, a lesson finally understood. The older Matthew seems to become, the more his public reflections often circle around these themes. Not because ambition disappeared, because perspective expanded. The view from further down the road naturally differs from the view near the beginning. The landscape reveals patterns previously hidden. Connections become visible. Certain worries lose importance. Certain values gain importance. The road itself remains, but the traveller understands it differently. Imagine a ranch in the late afternoon. The sunlight stretches low across open land. Long shadows move slowly across the grass. The sky appears impossibly large. Wind passes through trees with a soft rustling sound. There are no cameras, no interviews, no audience, only space, only time, only the quiet experience of being present. Such moments seem to echo throughout his life, not because they provide answers, because they provide perspective. The horizon becomes visible, the distance becomes visible, the scale of things becomes visible. Human beings often search for meaning in dramatic events. Yet meaning frequently emerges through ordinary experiences observed carefully. A sunrise, a drive, a conversation, a notebook, a family meal, a road stretching beyond sight. The years ahead remain unwritten. Projects will come. Projects will end. New interests will emerge. Unexpected opportunities will appear. The future, as always, remains uncertain, and uncertainty remains one of life's most faithful companions. Perhaps that is why roads continue appearing throughout this story. A road is never entirely about destination. A road is about continuation, about movement, about the willingness to travel despite incomplete knowledge of what lies ahead. The young man driving through darkness before sunrise could not have imagined every chapter that would follow. The actor standing at a career crossroads could not fully see what waited beyond uncertainty. The father writing in journals cannot completely predict the years still to come. None of them can, and yet all of them continue forward. The same traveller, different seasons, different landscapes, the same horizon, forever retreating just far enough to invite another step. Evening settles gradually across the open land. The last light remains visible at the edge of the world. A notebook closes softly. The day is finished. The road continues, and somewhere beyond the horizon, beyond what can currently be seen, another morning is already preparing to arrive. The road continues long after most people stop paying attention to it. Not the literal road, though there have been many of those throughout Matthew McConaughey's life. Highways crossing Texas, rural roads leading toward ranches, airport roads connecting one destination to another, roads disappearing into darkness before sunrise. The deeper road, the one that exists beneath careers, accomplishments, and public recognition. The road that keeps asking a person to remain curious. The road that never fully reveals what lies around the next bend. By this stage of life, many of the goals that once seemed distant have already been reached. The young man searching for direction found one. The aspiring actor built a career. The performer reinvented himself. The writer filled journals. The husband and father built a family. Entire chapters that once existed only as possibilities became realities. And yet life remains unfinished. That may be one of its quietest truths. There is no final arrival, no permanent destination where all questions disappear. There are only new landscapes, new seasons, new opportunities to pay attention. Imagine an evening on a ranch as daylight slowly begins to fade. The air has cooled after a warm afternoon. The sky stretches outward in every direction. A few clouds drift across the horizon, their edges catching the final traces of sunlight. Somewhere in the distance, a bird crosses the open sky before disappearing from view. Nothing dramatic is happening. Nothing needs to happen. The value of the moment exists entirely within the moment itself. Perhaps this kind of awareness becomes easier with time. Many people spend years racing toward future goals. They focus on what comes next, then what comes after that, then the thing beyond that. Eventually, some discover that life was never waiting at the finish line. Life was happening during the journey, during the drives, the conversations, the mistakes, the waiting, the uncertainty, the ordinary mornings and quiet evenings, the moments that seemed too small to matter. Matthew's story often appears unusual when viewed from a distance. Hollywood success, awards, public recognition, best-selling books, famous roles. Yet beneath those visible achievements exists something surprisingly familiar. A person trying to understand his own life. A person making choices without perfect information. A person leaving certain roads behind and following others. A person learning that certainty is often less important than curiosity. Perhaps that is why so many people connect with his reflections, not because their lives resemble his circumstances, because they recognize the experience of searching, the experience of standing at crossroads, the experience of wondering whether the road they are on remains the right one. These experiences belong to everyone. As the years continue unfolding, the journals continue as well. New pages join old pages. New observations join old observations. The conversation between past and present remains active. Somewhere on a shelf sits a notebook filled decades ago by a younger man who could not possibly have predicted everything that followed. And somewhere nearby sits a newer notebook containing questions that have not yet found answers. The dialogue continues. One version of the traveller speaking to another, one season speaking to the next. There is something comforting about that continuity. The world changes, careers change, people change, yet certain habits remain, certain values remain, certain forms of curiosity remain. Night begins arriving fully now. The last traces of sunlight fade beyond the horizon. Stars emerge one by one overhead. The landscape grows quieter. Distances become harder to see. Yet the road still exists, even when hidden by darkness, even when the next mile cannot be seen. It remains there, waiting. Many years ago, a young man drove through the darkness before sunrise without knowing where life would eventually lead. The road ahead was invisible beyond the reach of his headlights. He could only see a short distance at a time. That was enough. It has always been enough. Most lives are lived exactly that way, not through complete understanding, through partial understanding, not through certainty, through movement, a few feet of road visible at a time, a few choices visible at a time, a few years understandable at a time. The rest arrives later, or sometimes never, and perhaps that mystery is not a problem to be solved. Perhaps it is part of the gift. The stars continue multiplying overhead. The air grows cooler. The notebook remains closed for the evening. There will be more pages tomorrow, more thoughts, more observations, more roads. For now, the day is complete. The horizon has disappeared into darkness, yet somehow it still feels present. Somewhere beyond the night, another sunrise is already making its quiet approach. Another morning will eventually touch the fields, the roads, the towns, and the open sky. And when it does, the journey will continue as it always has. Not toward an ending. Not toward a final answer. Simply onward. One road, one season, one page at a time. The night settles gently over the landscape. The wind softens. The stars remain. And in the great quiet beyond the horizon, the road continues. Much later, after the interviews have ended and the cameras have been packed away, there remains a version of life that no audience ever fully sees. It exists in small moments. A morning coffee before the rest of the house wakes up. A quiet walk across familiar ground. A notebook opened without any intention of publishing what is written. The world often pays attention to milestones because milestones are easy to recognize. Awards can be counted, films can be listed, achievements can be measured. The quieter moments resist measurement, yet they may be the moments that shape a life most deeply. Imagine a porch somewhere in Texas as dawn slowly arrives. The horizon is beginning to brighten. Birds are starting to move through the trees. The air carries that brief stillness that exists only before the day fully begins. Nothing extraordinary is happening. No audience is watching, no performance is required. There is only a person sitting quietly and observing the world wake up. Perhaps that is where many journeys eventually lead. Not toward bigger stages, not toward louder recognition, toward a greater appreciation for ordinary things. The sound of wind, the presence of family, the comfort of familiar places, the simple privilege of another morning. As years pass, memories begin gathering in unexpected ways. A highway seen decades ago returns without warning. A conversation from childhood suddenly becomes meaningful. A lesson learned through failure reveals its value years later. Life rarely arranges its insights in chronological order. Instead, they arrive when they are needed. A person spends decades collecting experiences and then slowly discovers what they meant. The road behind becomes visible in ways it never was while travelling it, and yet the road ahead remains hidden. That part never changes, even now. Even after all the films, even after all the recognition, even after all the pages written, the horizon remains what it has always been, a place where certainty ends and possibility begins. The sun rises fully now. Light spreads across the landscape. The darkness retreats. The road stretches outward once more, not demanding anything, not promising anything, simply waiting. And somewhere beyond the next hill, beyond the next turn, beyond the next horizon, another story is quietly preparing to begin. But for now there is no need to hurry toward it. The morning is enough. The road is enough. This moment is enough. And in the calm stillness of the waking day, the journey continues exactly as it always has, gently, quietly, and one step at a time. The morning continues unfolding slowly. Sunlight settles across the land with no urgency. The roads that seemed mysterious in darkness now reveal themselves clearly. Fence lines stretch toward the horizon. Trees stand quietly in the distance. The world looks familiar again, yet somehow different from the night before. Perhaps every journey creates that feeling. The landscape remains the same. The traveller changes. A lifetime can sometimes be understood through movement. Not movement toward fame or achievement, but movement toward awareness. A young man leaves home. An actor leaves certainty. A father learns patience. A writer fills notebooks. The years continue adding layers to a life that never stops becoming itself. Somewhere inside a drawer rests an old journal page written decades earlier. The handwriting belongs to someone younger, someone who had not yet lived most of the experiences that now exist as memories. The page remains unchanged. The person who wrote it does not. That is one of the quiet miracles of time. We keep moving while pieces of our former selves remain waiting in photographs, notebooks, and memories. They remind us where we have been. They remind us how much was once unknown. The wind moves gently across open ground. Clouds drift overhead. The day settles into its ordinary rhythm. There are phone calls to answer, places to go, people to love, stories still waiting to be told. Yet none of those things need attention right now. For this moment, there is only stillness, only the sound of distant birds, only the warmth of sunlight arriving across the landscape, only the simple awareness of being here. The horizon remains exactly where it has always been, far enough away to invite curiosity, close enough to remain visible, and perhaps that is all anyone ever truly needs. A road worth following, a few people worth sharing it with, a reason to stay curious. The rest unfolds in its own time. The morning grows brighter, the shadows grow shorter, the notebook remains closed, and the road, patient as ever, continues into the distance. By late afternoon, the light has changed again. The brightness of morning has softened into something warmer. Long shadows begin stretching across the ground. The day is no longer beginning, yet it is not quite ending either. It exists in that quiet middle space where nothing urgent demands attention. A truck moves slowly down a distant road. A gate closes somewhere beyond sight. The wind shifts direction. Small details, easily overlooked, continue their steady rhythm. Much of life unfolds this way. Not through major turning points, through ordinary afternoons that eventually become years. Looking back, it can be tempting to divide life into chapters. Childhood, college, success, reinvention, family, reflection. But lived experience rarely feels so organized. Most days simply arrive, one after another. A person wakes up, makes decisions, learns something, misses something, notices something, then does it all again the next day. The larger story reveals itself only afterward. Perhaps that is why journals matter. They preserve the texture of ordinary life, the thoughts that seem too small to remember, the observations that felt insignificant at the time. Years later, those details become landmarks. A sentence written in a notebook, a road travelled repeatedly, a memory that refuses to fade. Together they form a map, not a map toward a destination, a map showing where the traveller has already been. The afternoon drifts quietly toward evening. Clouds gather near the horizon. The sky begins preparing for another sunset. Somewhere a notebook waits for another page. Somewhere another question is forming, not because every question needs an answer, because curiosity remains alive. And as long as curiosity remains alive, the journey remains unfinished. The road ahead is still there, invisible in places, unexpected in others, stretching beyond sight, patiently waiting for tomorrow. The sun lowers a little further, the air cools slightly, and for a few moments, before evening fully arrives, everything feels perfectly still. Evening arrives the way it always has, slowly, without announcement. The sky begins surrendering its blue to softer shades of gold and amber. The heat stored in the earth throughout the day starts drifting upward into the cooling air. Shadows lengthen across fields, roads, and fences that have stood through countless sunsets before this one. A person could spend an entire life chasing horizons. Many do. They move from goal to goal, city to city, chapter to chapter, believing that fulfillment exists just beyond the next rise in the distance. Then one day they pause and discover that some of life's most meaningful moments were never waiting at the horizon at all. They were here, in the ordinary spaces between departures and arrivals, in conversations that lasted longer than expected, in laughter shared around a table, in mornings that began quietly, in evenings exactly like this one. The world often celebrates achievement because achievement can be seen. It is visible, measurable, easy to describe. Presence is different. Presence leaves fewer records. No trophy exists for paying attention. No award exists for sitting quietly with people you love. No headline appears when someone notices a beautiful sunset. Yet these experiences remain, often longer than the achievements themselves. The light continues fading. A few stars appear overhead. The first evening sounds begin emerging from the landscape. A distant bird, the rustle of leaves, the subtle movement of air across open ground. Night approaches patiently, never rushed, never delayed, simply arriving when it is time. There is comfort in that rhythm, the certainty of sunrise and sunset, the certainty of seasons changing, the certainty that roads continue whether anyone travels them or not. Perhaps lives are not so different. People arrive, they learn, they wander, they love, they search, they grow. Then they pass their stories onward, not perfectly, not completely, just enough for the next travellers to continue. The darkness deepens now. The horizon becomes harder to distinguish from the sky. The distance disappears into shadow, yet somehow the road still feels present, even unseen, even hidden, waiting quietly beyond the reach of sight. Tomorrow it will be there again, the same road, a different day, a different version of the traveller. And so the journey continues, not because there is somewhere urgent to reach, because movement itself is part of being alive. The stars multiply overhead, the air grows still, the last traces of daylight disappear, and in the great quiet beyond the darkness, beyond memory, beyond certainty, the road stretches onward beneath the night sky, calm and endless, carrying its stories gently into tomorrow. Night settles fully across the landscape. The roads have become ribbons of darkness now, visible only where moonlight touches them. The fields lie quiet beneath the stars. Houses glow softly in the distance, their windows small islands of warmth scattered across the land. Most of the day's movement has ended. Cars have reached their destinations. Conversations have faded. Doors have closed. The world seems to exhale. There is something peaceful about hours like these. The expectations of the day have loosened their grip. The unfinished tasks can wait until morning. The questions that seemed urgent beneath the bright sun become gentler beneath the night sky. Perhaps that is why people have always looked upward after dark. For thousands of years, long before highways crossed Texas and long before films flickered across movie screens, people stood beneath stars and wondered. Not always about grand mysteries, sometimes about simple things. The future, family, the choices they had made, the choices they had not. The roads taken, the roads left unexplored. Those thoughts belong to every generation. A young man sitting on a porch, a traveller crossing unfamiliar country, a parent watching children grow older, an actor finishing another long day of work, different lives, the same sky, the same quiet questions drifting through the darkness. Somewhere inside a house, a notebook rests on a shelf, thousands of pages, thousands of observations, moments captured before they vanished. Many of those moments probably seemed ordinary while they were happening. A drive, a conversation, a sunrise, a feeling difficult to describe. Yet ordinary moments possess a strange power. Given enough time, they become the foundation of memory. When people look back across decades, they rarely remember every meeting or every accomplishment. They remember fragments, a particular road, a familiar voice, the smell of rain arriving before a storm, the feeling of possibility on a morning when everything still seemed unwritten. Memory gathers these fragments carefully, then carries them forward. The night grows deeper. A breeze moves across the open land. Somewhere far away, a train passes through darkness, its distant sound rising briefly before fading again. Travellers continue moving even now, truck drivers crossing state lines, pilots guiding aircraft through the clouds, families returning home, people beginning journeys whose destinations remain uncertain. Movement never fully stops. The world keeps turning, roads keep leading somewhere, stories keep unfolding, and perhaps that is comforting. No matter where one chapter ends, another quietly begins. Not immediately, not dramatically, simply and naturally, like dawn following night, like seasons following one another, like a road continuing beyond the edge of sight. The stars remain bright overhead. The horizon is invisible now, yet its presence can still be felt, waiting patiently beyond the darkness, beyond the fields, beyond the towns, beyond everything currently known. And in that stillness, there is no need to search for answers, no need to hurry toward tomorrow. The road will still be there when morning arrives. For now, the night is enough. The stars are enough. The quiet is enough. And beneath the vast sky stretching endlessly overhead, everything rests exactly where it belongs.